Hello, everyone. We are live and recording. A very happy Monday to everyone. Now, we have quite the thrilling start to this week. I am very excited because we have Laurie Faria, is it Stolarz?
Mm-hmm.
Yay! And April Henry with us this Monday. So a very large virtual round of applause. And now I'm excited. As I said, we have a very thrilling event tonight in store for you. So for Laurie, we are celebrating the last secret you'll ever keep. And just to give you a little morsel of what this is about, our main character is put in a well for 4 days, which is obviously horrible, but then she does get out of this well, but then there is the mystery of how did she get there? No one believes her that she was there, and she ends up finding online a group of people who have been through things and a support system and one other person who has been through something similar, and then that person goes missing, which is not a very good sign for a protagonist, nor the person that went missing, and thus a very thrilling, like nail-biting story comes from that. And then from Playing with Fire, we also have a nail-biter. Like I said, both of these are very thrilling, but Playing with Fire, as the title kind of says, just not in the most joyful way, is we have people going on a hike. They're going out into the lovely nature to have a peaceful interaction, and then all of a sudden you have fire. So then you are thrown into a survival story where the paths are blocked by a fire that is ravaging the area, and they have to figure out how to get out. And there may be some suspicious characters that are also trapped in the area because of the fire as well, and they have to navigate that, as well as find some allies. So before I pass it off to our amazing authors, house rules for everyone. As you may know, the Vanna White section. To the right-hand side, we have our chat section. Make sure to say hello and give a shout out. I'll be in there during the event. And then also, if you have any questions for our authors, I would highly encourage you to ask them in the Ask a Question button down below. Just click that and you can answer the question. I mean, events are fun because you're getting to interact with the authors and pry their brains, so definitely take advantage. And also, you may be wondering, how can I get these thrilling novels? If you have not already purchased them, or if you would like to purchase any other books by these authors, there's a purchase book button down below. And when you purchase the book tonight, not only will you get the book, you can get a personalized book plate from both of our authors. Now, I'm going to go ahead and pass it off. I will see you guys at the end of the event. Bye.
Bye. All right. Well, thank you so much, Constance. And thank you for everyone for coming tonight. We're really excited to do this chat. I'm a huge fan of April Henry's as well as Mysterious Galaxy Bookstore. I did a live event, actually in person at Mysterious Galaxy, maybe 5 years ago now. And then I did another virtual event last year. So I'm Laurie Stolarz, as Constance mentioned. I am the author of 18 young adult novels. Most recently, I have Jane Anonymous. This came out January of 2020. And as you mentioned, The Last Secret You'll Ever Keep. And this one came out just a couple months ago in March. And these ones they're loosely tied together, although they're both considered standalones. I'm also the author of the Blues for Nightmares series, the Dark House series, Touch series, and some other standalones. And I love doing these events and connecting with readers. And I teach a bunch of workshops. And I'll give it over to you, April. Do you want to talk a little bit about your books?
Okay, I'm April Henry. My Playing with Fire was my 26th book. I've written about half for teens, half for adults, but they're all mysteries and thrillers. I just like scary stuff. And I live in Portland, and I'm finally getting used to doing events virtually, and then hoping maybe there'll be some live ones in the fall. So
hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully. So that's basically me.
So I'm really excited about Playing with Fire. I was wondering if you want to talk about the inspiration.
Yeah, okay, so Playing with Fire has this great cover. I love this cover.
Mm-hmm.
So it's in 2019, there was a group of people who were trapped at a swimming hole in the wilderness. There was one that was very close to a parking lot, so people would just walk over there after parking their cars. It was only about 1.5 miles from a parking lot. And they were people that didn't know each other. And they started to turn around and go back, and they didn't know it, but a 15-year-old boy had been throwing firecrackers in the woods while some of his friends filmed him and laughed, and he had set the whole woods on fire, and he ultimately ended up causing $43 million worth of damage and really harming the Columbia Gorge, which is like Oregon's crown jewel. So, but I got wrapped up in the idea of all these people who were trapped together, who didn't know each other, who didn't have cell service, and who had to team up together in order to survive. So when I saw that, I thought, wow, that is a book. I usually write books about killers, and in this book, the serial killer is mostly nature. So it was a fun kind of departure while still staying with the kind of thing I like to write. What about you? Where did the idea for your book come from?
So for The Last Secret You'll Ever Keep, sorry, I'm losing my voice. I'm in Boston and it's 10 o'clock. So I have my night voice. I wanted to show a character who is who's experienced something really traumatic, and she comes to her situation. As we mentioned, she is taken for 4 days, and she is, kept captive at the bottom of a well. But she comes to the table. She comes to that tragic situation already with a traumatic past. So when she is able to get out of her situation, and when she tells her story, because she's had a traumatic past, nobody really believes her. So I wanted to show, how reliable is somebody who does have a difficult past and comes to the table with, not the greatest track record of being the most reliable. So she's lied in the past. She's disappointed people in the past. So I wanted to show, what happens in that situation. Do you believe the person who tells about the trauma? How likable are they? How are you able to kind of still support that person when you don't fully trust them? And I also, like you mentioned, I also love things that are really suspenseful, and I love thrillers myself, but I really like psychological thrillers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The reviews were stunning for that book. They were so glowing. I was jealous.
Thank you. What kind of research did you end up having to do?
Well, the first thing I did was we went over to Washington State. So the flip side of the Columbia Gorge, they used to be like mirror images of each other. But once most of the Oregon side had been damaged, we hiked on the Washington side so I could write the passages about what it would look like before the forest fire. I got certified in wilderness medicine because I wanted a character who would know wilderness medicine or know what to do with somebody with like a bad cut or hypothermia or a dislocated knee. So I spent 3 days with a bunch of very, very intense people who would like go and be in the woods for weeks at a time, or sea kayaked or free mountain climbed without ropes. And I was definitely the most boring of all of them. I was trying to have a passage where there's a character with a baby on their back in a baby backpack. And if you're crossing a stream that might knock you off your feet, you're supposed to keep your backpack loose so it doesn't have the belt on it. And then if you get knocked over, you're supposed to shed the backpack and float face up down the stream with your feet pointed in the direction of the current. Well, if you had a baby on your back, that wouldn't work. I mean, you would drown the baby or lose the baby. So I went to REI and I had a long discussion with one of their hiking experts there about what I could do to save this baby. I wanted there was a couple of bridges that in real life the people didn't have to cross over them after they were burned, but there was a bridge called High Bridge that got completely burned down to the metal structure, and I wanted to have my characters cross over that. So I mean, ideally I would have had a toddler and a burned out bridge and done it myself, but instead I had to make do with a dog leash and the outside edge of our deck and 20 pounds of oatmeal that I pretended was a toddler. So I just really like things to be accurate. And I like to do research. I mean, probably the craziest thing I've ever done for research is about 5 years ago, I paid to have myself kidnapped as part of a class where you learn how to get out of duct tape and rope and zip ties and handcuffs, and how to tell if you're being followed, how to make a fake ID, how to make an improvised weapon. And the class was frankly terrifying. And the other people who took the class were crazy, but I learned so much in that class and I use it all the time.
That is crazy. There was actually a class to get kidnapped?
Well, it's mostly meant for people who are journalists, work overseas, do mission trips overseas. And there's a lot of countries where they might look at you and think you're an American. That means you're rich. I'm going to hold you hostage. Or they might think you're an American and I don't like what your country is doing, and I'm going to make your government change whatever they're doing. So right before the pandemic, there was a woman who was on safari who was kidnapped by some poachers who believed because she was American, she was really wealthy, and she was not really wealthy, but they were holding her for like $5 million worth of ransom. So it's the kind of thing that does happen, and there are classes in it. But the people I took the class were more on the crazy end of things. Like they're just out there. Let's just say that. Wow. So how about you? What kind of research did you do for your book? Did you climb into the bottom of a well?
No, I did not. That would have been horrifying. And the whole duct tape thing and claustrophobia, that would have been horrifying. But kudos to you. That's amazing. That's hardcore. That is some dedication to accuracy. I've done lots of research for the various books that I've done. For the Blue is for Nightmares series, I worked at a witch museum. I interviewed, just to get the details right, because I wanted to, I grew up in Salem, Mass. It was like nothing growing up there. It's like, oh yeah, there's the witch museum, there's the witch house, walk through Gallows Hill. Nobody really thinks anything of it because you live there. But then I was able to revisit it as an adult and really immerse myself in the research, which included, I ended up, like I said, I worked at the Witch Museum. I interviewed, practicing Wiccans versus practicing witches versus those who practice folk magic. For Project 17, which is about a group of teens who break into the former Danvers State Hospital, which is a mental health facility. I had to connect with a group of urban explorers to figure out how one might break into an abandoned place before it was to be demolished. I read the journals of former patients there. I interviewed former janitorial staff and nursing staff and patients. So I also get into the research quite a bit. For Jane Anonymous and The Last Secret You'll Ever Keep, I interviewed lots and lots of people who have experienced loss, because I really saw Jane Anonymous as a story about loss. In that one, Jane Anonymous goes missing for 7 months. She's kept in captivity. And so there's that part of the novel, but it's also after she gets back. So I really wanted to show like what happens to somebody after they've been through something that traumatic. How do they move forward in the present day? So how do people move forward after having experienced something so traumatic and having to experience that sort of loss, the loss of time, the loss of innocence, the loss of friends, family, who you
right.
And all of that. Yeah. Do you have?
Sorry.
Do you have a favorite character in books, whether it's Playing with Fire or in general?
I think at their heart, all their characters are me in some form, even the bad ones. I don't think I could write something that I couldn't imagine. And all of my main characters have a lot in common with me. And the main thing they have in common with me is that they will never, ever take no for an answer. Anybody who has ever told me no will learn that it is going to turn to yes sooner or later, not necessarily in a bad way. I'm just very persistent. So I don't know that I have an absolute favorite character because I think at some point they all just kind of are people that I really relate to. How about you? Do you have a favorite character?
I really do like Jane Anonymous. I like her in that, so after she gets out of her captivity situation, the people in her life give her time to heal and move forward, but she can't move forward. She's not ready. She can't fully process even what even happened. So I like that she takes healing under her own, kind of on her own. So she starts to journal about it, and she also, it just takes her longer to find the right person to tell her story to.
Mm-hmm.
But I like that she kind of does it on her own terms, because we all have this sort of, acceptable period of time, to allow people to grieve. But what happens when you need more time?
Yeah, there's someone on Twitter that I'm friends with right now whose dad died, and she posts almost every day about how difficult it is. And then I think there's almost an apology there, like she should be over it. But, no, you're not going to be over something in 3 days or whatever. It is going to take you months. And in some ways, I think that's a surprise for people, too, who haven't gone through a big, huge change like that it takes you a really long time to integrate that back into your regular life. Now, both you and I are very, very prolific people. So I wanted to know if you ever get stuck when you're writing, and what do you do to get unstuck?
I do get stuck in my writing. What I do to get unstuck is, the first thing I think is to get away from the computer, which can be daunting, I think, sometimes, just that blank screen and not knowing where you're going. So I like to get away from the computer, and I always have a notebook. So even, I'll take my notebook, I'll just change scenery, I'll go someplace else, and I'll jot down some notes about, what I know that I'm doing right. Like, I'll know what my intention is for the piece, or, what my character wants. I'll just kind of go through, make sure that I'm on the right, track. And then I'll write down some questions about, where I need to go and what my glitch is. Another thing I like to do is just talking it out with someone. And even if the other person doesn't even have to say anything, but just hearing myself talk about my glitch, it helps me process it in another way. And often, like I said, the person doesn't even have to say anything or participate in the conversation. I could be talking to the wall. Usually that helps me.
I have found sometimes that asking someone else for coffee and talking to them, they will start telling me their really bad idea for how to fix it. And meanwhile, I'm like internally thinking, I figured it out myself. So sometimes I think someone telling you a not good idea is helpful in a weird way, because you react to it and think, no, that is not what's going to happen. And you somehow know better what is going to happen.
Yeah.
Are there other things that you do?
The notebook and talking it through are the big ones for me. I'm always trying to also kind of, even with the notebook, as I mentioned, I'll write down a series of questions, but looking at the story from a different perspective. So maybe from a different character's point of view, try to look at the scene in a different way. How about you?
Sometimes for me, it's research will help me. I found the weirdest, coolest tidbits or things that took my book in a whole different direction. Lately, I am brave enough, and I wasn't for a long time, to read a book that's similar, not the same, but similar, and look at how did they tackle it. Because I know that even if I kind of not imitate them, but take an idea from them, that I can make it my own idea. It's kind of like a generic idea and I can make it mine. I will often write out of order. I don't know if you do that, but if I know a scene that's coming up later and I feel stuck on one scene, I might jump ahead and write.
Yeah.
And then this is a tip I picked up from a writing book I read a long time ago, but I think it's really cool. You make a list of 20 things that could not happen in your book that couldn't happen. And maybe around number 13, you think, wait, that one could happen. But I think if I get stuck, a lot of times it's that I'm worried it's not very good. And you need to kick the editor person out of your head, the critiquer person, because I think it gets in the way of you writing something that's halfway decent, or even writing something bad that you can edit later. I always know I can edit bad writing.
Right.
And I can't edit nothing. And how I feel about something, sometimes I will look back and think, wait, I wrote this and I hated it, or I wrote this and I didn't feel right about it, and it's actually pretty good. So in some ways, I almost don't trust my judgment in the moment, that it might take time for me to come back, and it might just be a reaction and only having gotten 4 hours of sleep the night before or something.
Right. So you mentioned the research. I think that's a really good way to get unstuck. But then I find myself, sometimes you can go down the rabbit hole of research, right? And
you've learned all about the underside of the iceberg. And
right, exactly.
And you read books that the person, you can see their life, but I learned this, and now you have to learn it. It doesn't really fit in the story, but they thought it was so fascinating they have to put in anyway.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Why do you think that you write thrillers? What draws you to that genre?
I just love anything where the stakes are really high. And I'm never going to write a book about a girl who can't decide who to go to prom with, because that really doesn't interest me. I mean, in a thriller or a mystery, the stakes are always life or death. And also, I think the research is really interesting. There's a lot of advances being made right now in like genetic genealogy, or other aspects of DNA. It's just interesting to do all the research and learn how it all works. So it's stuff that I would like to read about anyway, but now I get to read about it, when it's part of my job. How about you? Why do you like thrillers?
I think because that's what I really like to read as well. It's always been what I've loved to read as a young person, as a young adult myself. I would always gravitate toward those books that kept me turning pages. And as you're saying, where the stakes are so high and, somebody's in danger and you really are kind of on the edge of your seat as you're cheering the protagonist on and, hoping that they get what they need in the end.
Right.
Yeah.
Are you an outliner or a pantser? Plotter or pantser? Do you have an outline, or do you write by the seat of your pants?
There's no one right way, right? I've done both, and both have their advantages and disadvantages for sure. I mean, I've done the whole outline thing, and then, it lacks some of the freshness you get from, just kind of going by the seat of your pants and being so totally open to what could come up in a story. And then I've gone the other way too, and then realized, well, this 100 pages, these don't fit anymore because a new direction. So I try to do a little bit of both. But when I first start a book, I really try to think about, what is my intention with this piece? Like, why am I even writing it? What's my goal here? What am I exploring? And in Jane Anonymous, it was that whole idea of the loss. And in The Last Secret You'll Ever Keep, it was really about reliability and how much slack do we give somebody who's been through, a lot, and now they have another story. And
which is, a really pertinent question. The people who have bad things happen to them often have already had bad things happen to them and may have made bad choices in the past.
Right. And it makes them, not only not the most reliable and trustworthy, but because they make mistakes, they're flawed.
Mm-hmm.
People are flawed characters. So, do we stick around for them?
I'm kind of a plotzer, so I try and plot just because I feel like it's faster. It's way faster if you have a good plot. But sometimes, like in Run, Hide, Fight Back, I was going to have this girl go over a wall. I did a ton of research. Like, you know how in books and movies, people are always crawling around in air vents? Well, you can't really do that. It doesn't work. You'd make a ton of noise. It's not made to hold your weight. It's not big enough. You'd probably just crawl into a fan. But I got this way and even like researched acoustical ceiling tiles and how much weight they could hold. And I made it. There was going to be a shelf they could put across it and distribute the weight. And then I wanted, in the outline, the girl was supposed to go over. And she's just like, no way. It's dangerous, man. I'm not doing that. So sometimes, what you think your plot is going to be, your characters won't do it. But I try to outline more just because I do feel like it makes the book move faster for me. And a lot of times now I'm on pretty tight deadlines, so I need to turn it in quickly. Because I'm like right now I'm in the process of selling a book, and I'm worried that when they say, oh, we like the idea, now give it to us, and it's going to be a really short period of time. So I need to have a bunch of stuff kind of planned out in case they do like it. Do you always write on a computer, or do you write in that notebook sometimes?
I sometimes write in the notebook. Yes. I can write anywhere. So I don't have like one place. I do like my office space that I use, but I write in the car. I'll write in waiting rooms. I'll write at coffee shops. I write anywhere. How about you?
I have a treadmill desk, which is like my favorite thing ever.
Wow. That's great.
And it's great because I gained weight when I used to work. I wrote a couple books in a coffee shop, and they had these cute little cookies that were 2 for $1. I was always buying those cookies. So this is healthier. Yeah, but I have really illegible handwriting. Really, I can't even read my own grocery list half the time. So handwriting, I don't think would ever work. I know people say you tap into a different side of your brain or something, but mine's obviously like the crazy side because I cannot read it. So, and I write kind of clean up as I go along. It's hard for me to move forward. I tried this last book to write a messy first draft and it didn't work. Do you do messy first draft and clean up, or do you clean up as you go?
Do you mean, you mean kind of like just kind of keep moving forward?
Yes, no matter what. Like,
oh God, no, I can't do that. I can't. I wish I could. I don't know. I say that I wish I could, but I can't because the idea of all of that is horrifying to me.
So there's another YA author named Jessica Brody, and so she advocates that if you decide that, hey, it's not the mom who's dead, it's the dad, that you just keep writing and you change it from that point. And then if later you decide, no, it's the mom who's dead, then you just keep writing from that point. And then after you're all done, you go back and fix it up. And I tried to write like that, and she writes very well like that, but I cannot make it work.
Yeah. Do you ever get to a certain point, because you are, you said that you do some outlining. Do you ever get to a certain point, like 100 pages in, and you just decide, oh, it should be from another character's point of view, or I should do something totally radically different?
I don't think that I have. I usually kind of know who my main character is going to be, and it wouldn't really fit to be any of the other characters. So I don't know that I've made a really drastic thing like that where you have to like throw everything away. Have you?
I have, yeah.
Ooh, that must have been a bad feeling.
It is, but at the same time, it's like, usually if I get to that point, I know that something isn't quite right. So then when you discover what the missing piece is, it feels good.
And then you kind of snaps into place and works better.
Yeah. But I won't go with the whole messy. I won't keep moving forward. I'll fix everything first.
I had mine. I don't do a lot of revision because the revisions already come with each chapter. That, it feels like it's clean before I move ahead, or pretty clean anyway.
Yeah. How long does it take you to draft?
6 months.
Yeah.
Ish.
Yeah.
I don't know. It seems like it's hard to say because I sell books on or I have until recently, on an outline and a partial, or a synopsis and a partial. So some of it's already written. And then usually I get interrupted in the middle with like, can you do this revision? Can you look at this copy edit? So that takes away time. So it's not, I wish I kind of knew. I mean, I think ideally I'd like 9 months, like a baby. It feels like that's about the right amount of time, but I've been writing shorter than that.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Maybe we should look at some of these questions.
Okay.
So which secondary character was the most challenging character to write, and which one was the most enjoyable to write?
Trying to think.
Do you have a secondary character that was
Well, I'm playing with fire. My editor wanted me to change something about the book, a big change, or to me it seemed big. And so I had to add a secondary character, and then they had to have things from his point of view, and his motivation and what had happened and how to tell what had happened to bring him to this point and make him like that. And that also meant I lost a whole secondary character. Jackson with an X is gone, and I kind of like Jackson, so now there's a whole new character in there named Jason, and I had to understand him and do it quickly. So that was a little bit difficult to also, I needed to think of some cool thing that he had done, so I spent a lot of time researching a particular kind of cool thing so that I could like steal an idea from real life that somebody had. So he was probably the hardest one to write. And then in terms of the character that I liked the best, that was a secondary character. There was a guy named Marcus who won having his name in a book for an auction for some, I don't know, literacy or something. So he sent me pictures of himself. Okay. And so I liked how that character turned out. He sent me pictures of himself when he was a teenager. So Marco's in the book, and I tried to use some of his temperament that he told me about. How about you? Do you have any hard secondary or easy secondary characters?
A tough secondary character for me in The Last Secret You'll Ever Keep was Tara's, the main character's aunt. So that's who she is living with. And after she gets back from the well after the 4 days in captivity there, she tells the aunt her story, and the aunt is very, very sympathetic initially. But then you see, days pass, weeks passed, and the story isn't adding up that she was taken at all. And actually evidence points the other way, that she wasn't, that it's all been, just a big story that she's made up for attention. And you see the credibility, even with her aunt, who is her primary caregiver at this point, kind of slip away. And so I had to get into the aunt's psychology of why somebody like that, who would be, supposedly her biggest supporter in the moment, why she reacts the way she does. And it ends up being, there's a lot of backstory with the aunt and Tara's mother, who has passed away.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it seems like you had to find your way to the story by finding more of the backstory.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. And I think that, that's so important with, secondary characters for sure, even minor characters, because, we all have our different situations that help us kind of inform the decisions that we're making, the relationships that we have, and how they respond to our main characters and all of their secrets and their flaws and their actions. Okay, so how has technology affected writing thrillers for you throughout the year, in particular in regards to internet and smartphones?
Did you know that they rewrote all the Lois Duncan books to give the characters cell phones?
Did they?
Yeah, I was like, first of all, I was jealous because or jealous of like somebody who didn't have a cell phone, because cell phones are problematic. They make it much harder for you to be able to write a story where someone has no contact with someone. You're constantly having to have the battery go dead, or the bad guy takes the phone away and smashes it. It's much easier to look stuff up, to get directions. When I first wrote Girls Stolen, I was just lucky that I had the bad guy take away her phone. The main character is blind. In the interim, by the time I wrote a second book with that character, kind of companion novel like your two novels, so much had changed with smartphones for the blind. It's changed everything. The phone can read to them. The phone can give them directions. The phone can tell them what they're seeing. It can tell them what a color is. They can go into their cupboard and have 5 cans of Campbell's soup and know which one is bean and bacon, which you would never be able to tell with your fingers unless somebody stuck a Braille label on each one. So I was just lucky. But that's something that has, I think it's made it more difficult with cell phones to write a thriller, because you want your person to kind of be off the grid, or not have as much at their fingertips. And so it's kind of like writing a YA where you want the parents not to be around. And so the parents are often alcoholics or dead or divorced or very busy, so that they're not paying attention. It's sort of almost the same problem. How about you for technology?
Same. I mean, it's definitely made it harder for thrillers. It's harder to get away with crime. There's cameras everywhere. You can take a video on the fly.
Mm-hmm.
It's harder to get away with anything.
Then again, you can also use like the internet as a writer. You can use the internet easily to research stuff. I am old enough that when I started writing books, there wasn't the internet. Mm-hmm. And I try and remember what that was like. I would go to the library and there was these big green books called Reader's Guide to Periodical Literature. And I would open one and then something would happen that I no longer remember. So now I could just Google very quickly, what does it feel like when you're drowning, and find 8 first-person accounts of that. And so it's also made it easier for me to reach out to experts. People are very, very nice about, there's a guy that's my expert now on how to lock and unlock security doors, who's told me all these cool things that you could do with them. And I just emailed him just cold, and now he's like a source for me. So you can find people that you would never have found in real life.
Right.
How about you for like using the internet for research?
Yeah, exactly what you're saying. I mean, there's a wealth of information on whatever you're looking for. It seems, you can find some resource online, and a good resource online. And people are so open, as you're saying. They're so open and generous with their backstories, their experiences, which is really valuable to a writer.
I mean, I always do try, if it's something pretty technical, like I have a DNA expert that helps me, but I didn't come to him and be like, explain DNA to me. That would be, you try and do your reading first so that you come with a specific question about, I don't really understand about YSTR. Exactly. Is that admissible in court in any of the states or whatever? And actually, when you are a thriller writer and you read other thriller writers' books, you'll be like, no, that actually is not how that works. So you see the people who haven't done their research, or not enough of their research.
Right. Yes, absolutely. What scene or section brought you the most joy to write?
This book takes place in like not very long of a time period. It's about 24 hours. So I don't know was there a scene that really, it was fun just having my characters have really horrible things happen to them and then fixing it. So it was interesting watching, I watched a video of somebody having an asthma attack. Don't ask me why people film themselves doing things. I watched a video of someone being given a shot for a bee sting in their face and how it went down. So probably the funnest part was just doing the research and trying to think of all the bad things I could do to my characters, but not kill them, so, and then it was trying to figure out how to there was a dog in the group, how to get the dog across the burned out bridge. You can kill people all you want to in books. You kill an imaginary pet and you're going to get so many hate mail from people because you killed an imaginary dog or cat. So I ended up emailing and calling all these packing companies, asking about how would they get a big dog across a bridge, if there wasn't a bridge anymore, if it was just metal railing, and you get some really weird answers. Some people never ever understood that it was a fake dog.
Wow.
How about you? Was there anything that brought you a lot of joy to write?
In Jane Anonymous, I really like, there's a scene where, so Jane is, having a really hard time not being able to move on. And for her, it's not even that she can't move on as much as it is that she's disappointing the people in her life because she can't move on. So she's a further disappointment. But there's this one scene where she's at the animal shelter where she's volunteering, and she starts to have a panic attack. She's triggered by something there, and she has a panic attack, and one of the customers at the shelter was in the right place at the right time, and she is able to help her. But just that whole,
I remember that scene.
Strangers. Oh yeah, thank you. The kindness of strangers, and just for the first time, she just feels like she's finally heard.
Somebody asked, what's the biggest difference between writing an adult thriller versus writing a young adult thriller? The books are shorter. So there's usually like one less subplot. I had actually moved away from using much in terms of swears or, to be honest, you want to hear the worst swearing in the world? Park outside of middle school when they're getting out of school. They will swear like little sailors, and their parents would say that their kids don't even know those words. They know more words than you do, probably in Spanish and English. But I want to attract as many readers as possible. So my characters I just have like the bad guy. He swore, and everybody can fill that in. Same thing with violence. Actually, like if you are having kids ages 12 to 18 reading your book, you could have a very sheltered 12-year-old to an 18-year-old who's watching the Saw franchise or something. So a lot of times I will not really say what happened. I'll just have someone gasp in horror when they look at someone's face. And then each person fills it in for what is appropriate, what they would think would be horrifying. So mine are a little bit cleaned up, just because I want to have the widest audience possible. And I've also seen librarians have their jobs challenged for having a bunch of F words or something in there, which I don't personally have a problem with having F words in there, but I realize I can write around them and everybody knows it's an F word and you just didn't say it. So,
right.
But I don't really feel that there's much difference. I do not write with a different vocabulary. I don't write any different plot twists. The characters are just young and maybe they only learned how to drive a car last week or something. So
I would agree. I think it's just the world, right? And what young adults are concerned with or worried about or into, you're more conscious of that. But like you're saying, I would agree. I don't approach the writing itself any differently, the language or the vocabulary.
Yeah. Kids are pretty smart.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's see. Should we take one more question or?
Sure. What was the first thriller book that you read? Like ever?
I don't know about ever. Trying to think back. It kind of used to be like at my house, my parents did not care what we read. I read a lot of adult books when I was like 11 or 12. I remember reading The Godfather. And I was like, oh my God, people can have sex standing up. I didn't know that was a thing you could do. So they didn't really hide books from us or say we couldn't read them. As soon as we wanted to go upstairs to the adult section of the book world, we could in the library. So I'm trying to think which was my first thriller, though. The one I probably remember the best is like reading Presumed Innocent, and just that plot had so many interesting twists in it. And I went back years later and reread it, knowing the answer. And he had put the clues in there. They were hidden, like all good clues should be, but all the clues were in there, like what the bat killer was reading, had on their bedside table. The clues were all there. So it was a fun book to come back and pull apart. Is there one that comes to mind for you?
I think I read The Shining in middle school.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember being so scared and
Terrified.
Yeah. And then I know that very early on, I also read, speaking of Lois Duncan, I Know What You Did Last Summer. I was a big fan of that one too.
Yeah. My agent was actually her agent for a while. So
okay.
And she commented on one of my Facebook posts once. It was very exciting.
She did to me too. And I was so fan.
That's funny. Well, we'll be the future Lois Duncans, I guess, and be commenting on whatever people will be doing for as a Facebook substitute 10, 15, 20 years from now.
I know. All the questions.
Well, I wanted to pop back on because I have one final question for the two of you, and that is that in the world of writing, as many of us are familiar with, the book that is currently out and that we are celebrating has been written for quite some time. So my question is, after they gobble these books up, what can they expect next from you? Or what can you share that they can expect next? Because I know there are also things that must be kept secret as well.
Well, I have a bunch of books that are already finished. Eyes of the Forest comes out in August. It's about a fantasy writer who's very late with the last book in his series and is kidnapped by his biggest fan, chained to a treadmill desk, like my treadmill desk, and told that he has to finish writing the book or else. That one was fun to write because I got to write bits of fantasy, and one was supposed to be a bad fantasy and one was supposed to be a good fantasy. We'll see if anyone else can tell which one is the bad and which one is the good. And then after that, I have a book coming out called Two Truths and a Lie, sometime in 2022, about two groups of teens that get stranded. They're on their way to a conference. They get stranded together at an old rundown motel during a blizzard, and then one by one they start to die. And I just finished one that I don't know when it will come out, called You Have Reached the End, about a girl who has started a podcast about an old murder, and of course is going to get more than she expected. How about you, Laurie?
So I'm working on a couple of different projects. Both are thrillers, of course. One I am playing with multiple points of view, centered around the thrillerish crime. And then another project that I'm working on explores, it's a thriller, but in a different way. There's a mother-daughter relationship there, and they have a very kind of dysfunctional relationship. And the main character grows from it.
That sounds really, really, I love those kinds of, I love stories with growth. I think we all do. That's why we all love books. But I was like, oh. So I'm like, there's heartfelt, and then there's also really, really exciting things coming up from both of you. And I'm sure all of the books have both of those things. But, oh, I'm like, I want to read that one now. But I want to say thank you to both of you so very, very much for joining us. The last secret you'll ever keep, as well as playing with fire, both just like sound so incredibly exciting, and I highly recommend all of you to go and check them out, as well as Jane Anonymous and the other books that are coming out. I know April also has Eyes of the Forest as well, I believe.
Yeah, that's in August.
Yeah, in August. So all of the information for those books and more will be at the Purchase Books button down below. And most importantly, I want to say a huge thank you to our authors tonight for sharing. Both of you are such great authors with so many good books under your belt. So thank you for spending the evening with us. Thank you for coming back after Jane Anonymous, Laurie. It was a pleasure to get to have you back again and celebrate another book.
Thank you.
And April, I hope we get to have you back again, because it was such a pleasure hearing both of you in conversation. So we will say thank you to everyone who was tuning in tonight, and we will see you all next time. And have a good night, April. Have a good night, Laurie. Goodbye, everyone.
You can go to sleep now.
Exactly. Sweet dreams.
All right. Bye-bye.